Peter.
Then
Right.
we can start the show in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fragments of silicon, never too preoccupied with whether we should to decide whether or not we can.
All right. It feels good to be back. Yes. Welcome to our first regular Fragments of Silicon episode in a couple weeks. Like, more on that in the news segment. But joining me, as always, are Golix,
Hello.
Petty Fan,
Yo.
Ogre,
Hurricane should just be worked into kicks, not nature.
and Twilight.
Hello.
And joining us this week, is our own Naka, but he's here for an interview. We'll get to that
Hi.
in a bit. Yes. I think it's been about a year since you last graced the program.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. Anyway, on to the news. And indeed, the first order of business is, yeah, you might have noticed it's been about 2 weeks since our last regular episode. And if you remember that, I noted that we were preparing for Hurricane Irma. I'm like, I warned that there might be a delay in scheduled production, and indeed that happened. I had to evacuate my home as the thing hit. Thankfully, no real damage. Really, the grand sum total in my area was I was inconvenienced for a week, which, given the size and power and everything of Hurricane Irma, damn sight lucky.
Yeah, like, isn't South Florida still screwed?
Yeah. That's gonna take some time to rebuild. My area, it's almost back to normal. Like, there's still some pock marks, like down trees on the side of the road and kind of deal. But for the most part, all the damage has been erased. From what I could see out today.
Yeah, like infrastructure is back up and running and whatnot.
Yeah, I was able to get water and gas and all those vital things that were in short supply during the hurricane.
Are you still under a boil order, or has that been lifted yet?
I believe that's been lifted. I'm like, I'm not sure if that was for my specific area, because I know they lifted some of the boil water notices, but some of the others, they are still around. I think my area is good. Like, so yeah. And I've been spending this week getting everything back in order with this show. Now, thankfully, nothing really bad happened. All right, that's about all the news I got this week. I know it's a break from tradition, but I'm like, this was kind of the most important thing coming into the program. Right. So, Ogre, why don't you go, and Naka, if you want to join them, that's fine.
Let's see. Not much personal-wise. All's just been kind of focused on making sure nature doesn't fucking kill us someday. Because apparently Mother Nature just wants to murder the shit out of the southern areas right now.
I think Mother Nature's just pissed about Trump being president as everyone else is.
Let's see. Let's Plays are going fine. We just finished up Strong Badia, the free, the other day.
So 6 months till episode 4.
Probably. Episode 3, so.
Oh, yeah, right. I can count.
What are you, the Leisure Suit Larry series?
Maybe.
Let's skip 4 and go straight to 5 because I can't think of a plot line to get out of this. Let's see. Alarcanassus just keeps being a bitch and a half.
2 0% wipes.
Yeah, that's always fucking fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I
Meaning
guess.
you hadn't done anything?
No,
No,
no.
it
It
means
means
that
she dies after the enrage timer hit 0.
which means
The
we lose
damage over
any-
time.
So she would have died if you hadn't died?
Yeah.
She would have
Okay.
died if we had like 3 more seconds.
Other than that, really not a whole lot going on. So, whoever is next is next.
All right, Petty Fan.
I'm getting a new keyboard Friday. Whoop whoop.
But does it light up?
Yes, and this one can light up in
okay.
colors.
Well, shut my mouth.
Well, my desk is really dark, so a lighted keyboard is kind of a necessity unless I want to try and put a lamp somewhere in here where there's no room. So
I think
yeah.
I need to invest in a new keyboard. This one I've had since my first computer, like over 10 years ago. So
Yeah, I've had this one for 5 years, but it's sometimes been starting to give me problems where it just kind of wants to restart itself, which means the controller chip in it's going bad. And last thing we need is in the middle of raid my keyboard to die.
yeah.
Aside from that, really not much. Like, just been kind of looking for people for MSP and doing life stuff.
All right, Galix, I think you're up.
Not a whole ton going on around here. The weather has been very gray for the last several days, but that's probably mostly hurricane spin-off, and in that situation, you can't really complain about it being a bit gray. Video game wise, I've been playing Metroid: Samus Returns quite a bit. I'm not very good at it, but you know, what you gonna do?
Get
It's
good?
still a lot. It's still a lot of fun. And we have a lot of games to play this week, so I'm trying to, even if like at least 2 of them are very, very short, so trying to make time for that.
We are reviewing one of them after the program. More on that at the bottom of the show.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot going on. I've just been feeling a little bit blah, but that's probably mostly weather based.
Duly noted. All right, Twilight, you're up.
Well, I've already spoken on this in MSP, but for Fragments, so, well, there's been mostly family-related stuff going on for the past few weeks. My cousin came in to visit from Seattle, and we've been mostly doing computer-related stuff while he's been here, and that's been fun.
Always fun.
Yeah, though, as I said before, while we was working with my mother's computer, the audio in it, internal audio, apparently decided to go bad or something. So we had to buy some speakers for her, and I'll probably actually look into it sometime soon to see if what exactly happened. And in addition to tech-related stuff, I forgot to mention this before. We got a new modem. Because,
Yay.
well, it's starting to fail.
Oh, so that would explain the you cutting out.
Probably. Yeah, we did a speed test, and it wasn't doing as good as it's supposed to have been, so I've now got a dual router and modem.
A combo unit or 2 separate ones?
A combo unit.
Yeah, we have one of those too. They're so convenient.
Yeah.
Just unplug one thing to reset it. So simple.
Yeah, pretty convenient. And as I said before, something decided to crawl up into my car, inside the car. Well, not inside, but underneath the car, and died.
Yes, somewhere in the mechanical bits.
Yeah. Though, thankfully, today when I was in town, it seems to finally have gone away.
So either it
So,
fell out or dried up.
yeah. Still no clue what it is, and I really don't care enough to try to find out.
Yeah.
Well, besides all that, been playing games for the show, and that'd be it for me.
All right. Like I said, this is the part where I normally give my news, but yeah, that was top of the show, and I do have more news, but that's for at the bottom, since it's mostly programming stuff. So with that in mind, merrily we shall roll along with the interview. And you might have noticed from the Chiron that we're having our good friend Naka here. And
Yo.
we're having, hang on. We're having him in a game dev capacity now, because Naka has been designing his own games lately. Right. So where to start? I suppose we should begin at the beginning. As in, what inspired you to, cross over to the other side, as it were, and get into game dev?
Honestly, I've been working on making games for a pretty long time, honestly, though it's never been kind of a thing to actually concern myself with too much. It started with in college, I, of course, took computer science. So I have a computer science degree, and playing video games, I like a lot. I like to create things, so it was kind of natural for me to say, hey, why don't I try creating a game? Programming strictly in C++ was unrealistic for one person, so it kind of fell off the wayside. But it was more recently I happened upon Multimedia Fusion 2 and then later Construct 2, which was an engine that I could actually make something decent in. So my first major project, which is still ongoing, is Gaia, which is a side-scrolling Metroidvania.
Oh, gee.
And that one has been going on for a very long time. It's been redesigned many, many times. It doesn't even begin to resemble what it started out resembling. But I didn't, at the time, I guess I didn't really have so much of a passion for game design. It was more that I just wanted to make that one game. I'd say it wasn't until more recently, now that I've been spending time around Madame Berry, who does make games, just seeing her spend so much time making games and getting involved with her on that end of it has gotten me interested in making games of my own. So what I've kind of started doing is, while still working on Gaia, in order to keep myself sane, I'll pick up a little side project every now and then whenever I get a neat idea for, like, hey, maybe it'd be cool if we had a game that did this. And usually the kind of games that I make, though very simple, are really just the kind of games that I want to play but aren't there. So I say, well, crap, I'm just going to make it myself.
I've heard that line before. I'm pretty sure that line's been uttered on the show more than once. But so, what kind of games did you feel was underrepresented in the current market?
The first thing I was looking for was I wanted to make I just had an urge to play a cute first-person dungeon crawler. That was the first thing I wanted to make. I wanted something mobile so I could play it on my break at lunch, like at lunch at work.
Right.
So that is what eventually became Tofu Tower, which Tofu Tower is actually done and completed and out, and anybody can play it. It's on itch.io and Game Jolt.
Right. In fact, Petty Fan is playing it right now. Like, we broadcast game footage on our Twitch page now. So
It didn't really turn out to be the first-person dungeon crawler mobile game that I had originally designed it to be, but I'm still really happy with how it turned out.
Indeed.
I'm not,
Like,
admittedly, I'm not entirely sure why I decided not to make it a first-person dungeon crawler. I think I just got an idea for how I wanted the environment to look like and went with it and just kind of forgot about the dungeon crawler part, or the first-person part.
well, was any attempt made to get first person?
Yeah, honest to goodness, no, not at all. I think just when I was still conceptualizing it, I was trying to figure out what it wanted to look like, so I was getting various ideas from various places, and I got that isometric aesthetic in my head, and I think by that point I'd just completely forgotten that I wanted it to be first person.
Huh. So it goes, I suppose.
Yeah, so there was that, and I also never got around to making it mobile. I tried to make it playable on mobile. In fact, if you go to itch.io or GameJolt on your phone, you can actually play the game in browser, but I cannot get my iPhone to save my game. So as soon as it unloads the page in memory, that's it for me. But it works otherwise. It's a little irritating because like the buttons are small and whatnot, but it works.
It's just it's not optimized for mobile.
Yeah. I think there came a point in development when I was thinking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and how I would go about making it mobile and what would be involved in actually releasing it mobile. And I realized that it was going to help my design to not make it, to not keep trying to take that into account. Like, because then I have to worry about button size and how UI works and...
Yeah. I'm like, tell me about it. I'm like, I've encountered the mobile PC divide plenty of times this week. Like, but anyway, did you ever try this on Android?
I don't have an Android to try it, and though Barry does, she didn't have one when I was actively working on the game. So I've not actually tried it on Android. Presumably it would work, though. It works because it works just in browser, so it's not actually...
Right. That's what I was suspecting. Like, I don't know if anyone's like commented, playing it on an Android phone or not.
Yeah, thus far I've not had any complaints about people not being able to play it on one system or another.
That's good. Like, and indeed, what's been the response to Tofu Tower thus far, I suppose?
A lot of the expected response. There were a lot of people that were pretty interested in it early on, had a lot of fun with it. They did mention that it gets a little grindy, gets a little samey over time, which I completely understand. I'd say the response has been mediocre to good. Like, for the most part, people have thought it's a pretty alright game, but it's nothing spectacular, which, honest to goodness, for my very first actually released game, I'll go with that.
Fair enough. Have you done any Game Jam games yet?
I have participated in 2 Game Jams. One Ludum Dare. And there was another one that me and Barry, like, cooperated. Yeah. Cooperated on. The one we cooperated on was a real silly thing, so that it almost doesn't count. But the one that I actually did participate in was a Ludum Dare, where the theme was entire game on one screen. So I made a game that I eventually called LED, which it's just a very simple little maze game where you run around a maze. When you reach the end, it kind of reconstructs the maze around you. So you go through multiple mazes, even though it stays on the one screen. And at the end of the day, I think for having made that in a effectively 48 hours, I'm pretty happy with it. But it is still just a maze game, really.
I think you remember you telling us this at one point, like, you know. But it's good that that worked out for you. Like, anyway, in relation to all these games and well, Gaia, what have you learned from these games that you are applying to that project?
I have learned to never make a card game and never program an advanced AI. Both of these things are things that will make you hate yourself.
I'm sure there's a story behind this.
Programming a card game was a lot of what came about with Tofu Tower, where I got a lot of ideas about what I wanted to do with the game and where I wanted to go with it, and the mechanics and systems that I wanted to be in place for the game. And as time went on, I found it just got increasingly and increasingly and increasingly complicated, to the point that what we have in Tofu Tower now is far, far simpler than what I had originally intended it to be. But I also deemed that it was unrealistic for a single person to do what I wanted to do in a reasonable amount of time. The advanced AI is where I am right now in the competitive puzzle game that I'm currently working on, where I made a lot of really strong progress early on. I've got the base mechanics of the game done. You can play two-player, play against each other competitively, and everything works completely as intended. I have since spent probably a couple months trying to get the opponent's AI to work so you can play against a CPU. And this has taken far longer than I expected it to take. I'd say if I'm as far as considering Well Gaia as a whole, there's a lot of things I'm learning, which one is what I can realistically attempt on my own. I've always told myself with Well Gaia that I just want to make a game for me. I want to make a game that I want to make. However long it takes, be darned. It doesn't matter if it takes 10 years or what. I've since realized that at the pace that I'm working and the size of the project that it was, 10 years was not unrealistic.
I'm like, you've been working on Well Gaia for as long as I've known you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Going on.
I've been working on it off and on for a very long time, but I've also taken very considerable breaks to either work on other things or just because I get burnt out working on Well Gaia. So it's hard to say how much work has actually gone into the game. There's, of course, has been a lot of art assets and design work done that's taken up more time than this, but I do know last year I decided, I came to the conclusion that working in multimedia fusion, as I had been, was getting to the point of actively limiting what I could do with the game and how long it would take me to complete it. Of the various things that I've learned working on other games that I can attribute to Well Gaia now is, one, just how long it takes to do things. I have a much better gauge of how long it takes to do things now. I feel like it's also gotten me a better handle on how to program efficiently, how to get things done in a reasonable amount of time, how to make a program that doesn't take an unreasonable amount of time to do simple things, just efficient programming. But I think it's also gotten me just to have a better eye as a designer as to what makes a good game, what's fun, what's involved in gameplay, and making a game, the whole process through. And where I got in Well Gaia when I decided to do this, do a pretty major change to it, was in multimedia fusion. The overarching problem is there are a lot of limitations on global code. You can have global code, you just can't do nearly as much with it as I needed to do. So what I ended up with was I had a copy of the entire engine to the game in every single room,
That doesn't
which
sound
sounds a little
efficient.
bloated, and it is. However,
Yeah, that's the thing that won't do any favors for data size or
Yeah.
processing.
And the funny thing is, though, it didn't actually increase the file size a huge amount. I don't know what kind of efficiency they've got in the actual execution of this. But I could make like 5 billion copies of one room, all with the entire engine in each room, and it barely increased the file size. But what this did mean, though, was if I ever decided to make any changes to the engine, I had to go and copy that change into every single room. Which is why, when I started out, I worked on a very long time to make the base engine as clean and sleek and bug-free as I possibly could. So I was confident that I would have to change the engine very little, if at all, as the game went on. One thing I've learned over the course of making games now is that's not going to happen. That's impossible. Making an entire engine up front and then making the entire game after that without changing a single line in the entire engine, it will never happen. Specifically, this got to the point of once I actually had made a little bit of game to run around, I actually had places to go and things that I could do. When I started thinking about programming enemies in and actually putting something in for you to interact with, I realized that the design is going to have to change. And it will change because there's so much that I simply cannot foresee. So upon realizing that, it occurred to me that if I had to, for every change that I was making with enemies, for every change that I made, whenever I decided I didn't like how you interacted with one enemy or how an enemy acted a certain way in a certain room, or just a part of the feel of the game didn't feel right, and I didn't realize that until I'd made one specific room with a specific obstacle in it. Once I realized that, I realized I cannot do this code copying thing anymore. On top of that, there were a couple shortcomings that I had had with Multimedia Fusion that I'd kind of worked around, but I couldn't really do anything with. For one, I could not make vertical moving platforms. I could make platforms that went left to right, but I could not get one that goes up to down. Up to down. That's grammar.
Did you just think that that would work the same and it didn't?
Sort of. I assumed if I could get it to work left to right, it would be fairly easy to do up to down. Said it again. Up and down in pretty much the same way. And it didn't. No matter what I did, I could not get up and down to work. And I think it had something to do with detecting the floor for collision detection and judging whether or not you're on the floor so you can jump again or whether or not you should fall through the floor. And left and right doesn't really matter because the floor is not moving in a way that will affect whether or not you can fall through it. So that was one issue. And another issue was the mini-map, which I could not make a mini-map that updated as you explored the area. This would have involved creating a separate entity for every possible room that you could make visible.
Yeah.
Which would have been something in the neighborhood of 400 entities just for the mini-map, which I believe is around the limit to how many entities Multimedia Fusion can display on the screen at one time. So I could have a mini-map, I just couldn't have the game.
Mini-map the game coming summer 2018.
Yeah, so...
I'm honestly surprised this hasn't been a thing yet.
Yeah, so what I did was I kind of just figured I'll just deal with not having vertical moving platforms. For the mini-map, I figured what I'll do is I'll put a map item in there that you can collect, and that'll just make the whole map visible, and until you collect that, the mini-map just won't show you where you are, so you kind of have to look around blind. And I figured, hey, maybe that'll kind of be interesting for the gameplay. You actually have to, like, pay attention to what's going on and figure out what's going on instead of relying on the map. And admittedly, maybe. But that's not really where I wanted to go with that. So as what I decided then was Multimedia Fusion just wasn't going to cut it anymore, and it reached a breaking point once I actually started thinking about enemies and having to make changes to the engine. So I moved to the engine that I had been using kind of casually to poo around with, the same engine that I made Tofu Tower in, and the same engine that Madame Berry works predominantly in, Construct 2. I realized this was going to set me back a little ways because I was going to have to effectively reprogram the entire game from the ground up. Which I did. And thankfully, being able to carry all my design, all my art assets over from Multimedia Fusion, and now knowing what the crap I'm doing, because when I first started programming Well Gaia, I did it years ago. It was my first major, it was my first real game. I didn't know how to do anything at the time. So it was a very slow process just figuring out how to even do what I wanted to do. And by now, I've got that down pat. So it took me a matter of 2 or 3 months. But I am not only caught up, I'm past where I was in Multimedia Fusion after just 2 or 3 months. Again, granted, I did have all the art assets and design work that I'd done to carry over already, so I didn't have to do all of that.
That's handy.
And right now, I'm so much happier with Well Gaia is now. I'm so much happier with the engine. I'm so much happier with all of the shortcuts that I had to take in Multimedia Fusion that I didn't have to do. I'm confident now that I have a more solid, a more enjoyable, a more impressive game than I had before.
That's good to hear. That's good.
But, yeah, 2 to 3 months after working on that, though, I kind of burnt myself out a little bit. So I decided I'm just going to take a little bit of a break from Well Gaia, do something else for a little while.
And I suppose that leads us to untitled competitive puzzle game.
Yeah, so right now I'm just calling it a competitive puzzle game. I don't really have a title for it yet. It's Madame Berry has suggested Tofu Topple.
Of course you would.
Okay, I got someone in the stream chat then that had suggested Tofu Topple. But it's a competitive puzzle game in the vein of something like Tetris Attack or Puyo Puyo or Magical Drop.
Which style did you pick?
It's probably closest to Magical Drop because this actually started with when Magical Drop 5 was released by Golgoth Studios. I was super excited because I've always loved Magical Drop, and I had made a fair number of videos, a good half dozen videos on Magical Drop 5 that I'd put on the channel at the time because I was so excited to see this new game came out, to enjoy the game, and to follow the work that was being done with it.
Yeah, I remember, I think you were still at the show at the time, and you were really excited about that. Like Golgoth, shame that they seem to have fallen off the face of the earth.
Yeah, like they abandoned Magical Drop, which is kind of sad, but...
Yeah,
and
well, they were like eternally working on a Joe and Mac remake, and a Toki remake. But
yeah, so I think what happened with Golgoth was I feel like they bit off more than they could chew. And in getting it up and running, they eventually reached the point because they did have a producer funding them to get this done. And when their funding ran out, they had to release what they had, which was effectively the broken Magical Drop 5 that we got on release. Now, there were still a lot of problems with it, and they wanted to fix these. So they managed to fix a number of them on their own dime, as well as kind of beg the producer for some more money, saying like, hey, we'll make our money back once we get the game up and running. So they worked on it, they fixed as much as they could, but the game just, even though they improved it a lot, it still just never quite got to the point that it needed to get to. So the producer pulled the plug, and at that point they had to produce, if they wanted to keep working on it, they had to keep working on it on their own dime, and it wasn't worth their money either, which is why they then switched focus to the Toki remake in hopes of releasing it to make some money. But I think the whole studio just fell under.
Yeah, Magical Drop 5 is still on Steam, and you can get it for $1. Like,
Wow.
Jesus.
Yeah, literally $1. Like, yeah, I remember they were having some problems with their publisher, UTV Ignition, which I also think doesn't exist anymore. That's kind of one of the reasons why. Anyway, yeah. So, how is it like Magical Drop, and how is it not like Magical Drop?
Well, a lot of the reason I wanted to make this game in the first place was because I was so excited for Magical Drop 5 that once NetPlay and everything got up and running, I wanted to hold a giant tournament for it. Just have a great time with it. And since it fell under, though, that never happened. So, again, I figured, well, I'll just make this my darn self.
I'm pretty sure if we had $1 every time someone mentioned that phrase, we'd be very rich human beings.
No kidding.
And so that's where I am now. I effectively started this project as I just want to make a Magical Drop that I can hold this friggin' tournament with. But I realized I can't just make a Magical Drop game. So I originally started by thinking all I want to do is make a Magical Drop game. But how can I change it to not be a Magical Drop game?
Yeah, how can I make this so I don't get sued?
Yeah, and it occurred to me, thank heavens, that that's not the way to go about this. That's still skirting the edge of being legal at all. So I instead opted to look at a lot of games, not just Magical Drop, but any competitive puzzle games I could come up with. And I looked at as many as I could find, and there's a surprisingly few of them.
Yeah, like the only big ones I know of is like Puyo Puyo and Tetris.
Yeah, I mentioned Tetris Attack, Puyo Puyo, and Magical Drop. And those 3 games generally make up at least the basis of what the vast majority of competitive puzzle games are.
Like I think Bejeweled 3 had a competitive element, but it was really crap.
There's another big one out there, and that's Super Puzzle Fighter.
Super Puzzle Fighter. I think Super Puzzle Fighter is
Capcom. It's the one with their Darkstalkers and Street Fighter characters.
Yeah, I'm trying to think which game. I'm trying to think. I didn't mention that one because that one fell in similar to. I gotta look up real quick.
To the internet.
Real-time research.
Not like that's never been done on this show before.
I forget what. Okay, I can't. I'd have to spend more time researching than I want to right now. But I didn't mention that one because I felt like it was still very similar to either Tetris Attack or Puyo Puyo, just kind of with its own gimmick to it.
Fair enough.
Like it's still shocking how many games are effectively Tetris Attack or Puyo Puyo with their own gimmick.
Insofar as it comes to, hey, there's a whole bunch of things and you have to match them up in various ways.
It was probably Puyo Puyo now that I think about it. It's probably closer to like Puyo Puyo with its own gimmick.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest one. I think Puyo Puyo is the one that like friggin' everybody rips off. But I looked at as many as I could, and I took even a lot of the games that kind of ripped off Puyo Puyo and what gimmicks they added to it and how they changed things, and I put together what I liked about these games, what I didn't like about these games, even looking back at Magical Drop and seeing what I liked about Magical Drop and what I didn't like about Magical Drop. And one thing that I really loved about Magical Drop was different selectable characters. Like in a fighting game, you could pick your own character that you wanted to play as. But I also felt like, as far as Magical Drop was concerned, they didn't do enough with the different playable characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because each
and
character,
some of them it's basically just cosmetic who you have standing on your side of the screen.
and honestly, it was. There were any number of characters in Magical Drop that played identically to another Magical Drop character. And the only thing that they changed was how the blocks advanced on the opponent's side of the screen when you completed combos.
Mm-hmm.
You'd get some characters like the Fool that just increase everything evenly, and then some characters like Empress, or was it Strength, that just rose like one spike straight up.
Yeah, I think they both did that. I think they just did it on different sides of the screen, if I'm remembering right.
And I felt like that didn't really do enough. For one, you could almost never tell when someone had attacked you because it was the same gems as always coming up.
Mm-hmm.
How you played the game in response to what character you were playing against didn't change at all. So I wanted to do more with the playable characters. And one thing that I really liked, specifically from Tetris Attack, was you knew, and Puyo Puyo, really, you knew when the opponent attacked you. When they did something and sent something your way, it fell down from the heavens as either a giant block or a whole bunch of the little like gray Puyo Puyo things falling down. You knew that came from them. And I loved that. So I wanted to do something that when you got hit with something, you knew it was because they attacked you. So what this came down to was similar to Magical Drop. One thing I'm doing is I have the whole screen flipped upside down for Magical Drop. So your clown character is on the top and the blocks rise up from the bottom. This is sort of because in games like Tetris Attack, the blocks rise up from the bottom. And also because, for whatever reason, I just hadn't looked up any videos on Magical Drop, and I thought it worked that way. And then I looked at it later on and went, why is it upside down? But now mine is blocks rising up from the bottom. But another thing that I liked about Magical Drop was the quota system, which is you could win by blocking out your opponent and getting their blocks to go all the way to the top, or you could win by destroying a certain number of blocks and raising your quota up all the way. Kind of removing an infinitely long game in that regard. And I know I'm bad at making combos. I'm bad at setting up these really complicated chains to be able to send like a 14 chain over to the opponent back and forth. So I've never been as fond of that, but I loved the idea of the quota system. So the idea with my game now is I wanted to emphasize a quota system like that, where the intention of the game is not to block out your opponent, it's to reach your quota first. So now we have a Magical Drop-like game where you can still pick up the gems and then throw them back down in order to make a match 3. But your goal now is to reach your quota before the opponent. The gems do not advance automatically because I don't want that added pressure. You have to advance them manually when you want more gems. And I have different playable characters. Each one has their own unique garbage block that gets sent to the opponent when you make a combo. So there are currently 9 playable characters. Each one has their own special little garbage block that gets sent over, and each garbage block has to be dealt with in a different way. It's a very distinct block that falls down, and There is, for example, Miss Naka's garbage block. After you pick it up, when you throw it back down, it will destroy every gem below it and send all of those blocks points towards the opponent's quota. So, of course, if you get one of those sent to you, you want to dig a hole down as deep as possible to get rid of all of these so you're not sending more points than necessary to the opponent. I've also got a bomb block, so just a block that after a period of time explodes, destroying the 8 blocks surrounding it over to the and sending all of those points to the opponent. So you'll want to clear out space around that one, so it blows up as few gems as possible. So the idea of the garbage blocks is, whereas in Tetris Attack or Puyo Puyo, when you send garbage over, the intention is to send over so much that you block out the opponent. Whereas in my game, instead I want the goal to be to slow down the opponent so they have to deal with your gems instead of raising their own quota, as well as give you quota back, give you more quota for it.
Now, you're not at all concerned about, or you're not very concerned about the idea that having lots and lots of different blocks might make it trickier to play quickly? Because these games, you often have to think pretty quick near the end.
Yeah. I feel like that's where having, at the very least, a limited number of playable characters would help. When you go up and you play against Rhina, say you know every garbage block that I get is going to be of this type. So you can think from beforehand what you have to do in order to handle that. And some blocks are more time consuming than others to deal with. Some blocks are very quick to deal with, but can potentially give the opponent more quota. Whereas other ones are much more troublesome to deal with, but don't give them much quota. So it also lends to what you want to do with your opponent. And you can be fairly quick about it if you really want to. Like, if you want speed, you can be fairly quick about dealing with all of these in an efficient way. For example, if you get Miss Naka's blocks that fall down, you just have to, or you should be thinking beforehand, you don't want to stack too high if you're going up against Miss Naka. So you'll be playing pretty low from the start, and just real quick, you dig down a couple blocks, grab all the blocks, dump them in the hole. Karen actually works much the same way, where you just have to real quick dig a hole, dump everything in the hole. And on a note of speed, the opponent AI right now, the highest difficulty that I have it able to do is that it makes one action per frame.
That is very fast.
It's a sight to behold.
Yeah, I guess you're right. If it's only one thing you're dealing with at once.
Yeah, and of course the idea as well is, in a lot of these games, you try to send as much garbage over to your opponent as possible. So you typically see dozens of blocks dump over on the opponent, and I want many fewer blocks going to the opponent. I want them to be a temporary distraction, something that you see and go, ah, crap, I got to deal with this real quick, and then get back to what you're supposed to be doing. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by them.
That makes sense.
And of course, dealing with that is still something that I haven't had a chance to play test too much of yet, because I'm still getting a lot of the base mechanics built in right now. Well, sort of. The base mechanics are done. I'm just dealing with a stupid AI. But I guess because of that, I haven't spent a lot of time refining things yet, because I know that I'm still getting things put in, and it's not going to do me a lot of good to refine one thing when I still have to add more things later on. I've got each element in the ballpark of what I want it to be and how I want it to function, and refining it from there should be fairly simple. or at least I've gotten it to a point that any further refinement should be fairly simple to do. And that's just balancing at that point.
Yeah, you gotta iterate and stuff.
So how much
And I'm-
more work would you say you have with this puzzle game?
Well, considering I was hoping to be done by now before I realized how long it takes to make an AI.
If we had there's another thing. If we had $1 for every time a dev uttered on this show, something that took a lot more time than it initially took, we'd be very wealthy.
Yeah, I feel like some other things were, there's just been a lot going on real life side, preventing me from working on it as often as I would like to. So that's another thing that's been holding me back, especially with the wedding not long ago. And I feel like
those tend to
especially
take some time.
yeah, especially after the wedding, I've been so burnt out that like I haven't even been programming as much as I could have. Like I've just been sitting back doing nothing for a couple of days, going, man, it feels good to not be doing something for a minute.
That's important too. Like we, especially since crunch is a very real thing in this industry.
Yeah, and thankfully, I of course still have my proper job, my YouTube and everything. This is still effectively a side thing for me. So while I have a degree of urgency to get it done, I am thankfully working on my own schedule. So I don't have a deadline of I have to finish at this point, or
or you're not able to make rent this month.
yeah. So thankfully I don't have that working. Though it is still my priority right now to get this done, but I feel like if it's taking too long, I may, well, no, I don't want to get this far into it and then not get it done. But it's taking long enough now that I may want to at least try to start doing some work on Well Gaia again on the side, just so it's not taking me absolutely forever to get Well Gaia done, which it's already taking to get done.
I actually had a question about Well Gaia, which sort of involves what I've seen about how you've done about it. When you're working on the game, does working on the setting and fluff and ideas and stuff always happen at the same time, or do you sometimes have an idea for cool stuff to go in the world when you're not working on the game, or vice versa, when you're not in the position to be working on the game, or vice versa? Because it's kind of a whole setting you've developed and stuff in addition to being a game, obviously.
Yeah, I've done a lot of world building. I've done a lot of character development and figuring out or developing characters. And a lot of that has been done kind of as I get ideas for things, which that is all done just as, I guess it happens naturally. I don't sit down and think, I need this. And thankfully, at this point, I've got enough work, I've got enough characters done, enough world built, that the game that I'm currently working on, I don't need to work and develop anything additional for that. I have everything that I need for that. So at this point, anything that I think up is entirely just world building. Which world building is super fun. I like world building. I like it when people ask me questions, like on Tumblr, I get some asks every now and then about just silly little mundane things about how the world works, and it makes me go, how does that work?
Like, why don't your characters have zippers?
Because zippers don't exist in Well Gaia. Dang it.
I feel like there's something to that.
Not especially, but I had done some thinking at one point about just where where technology was, and what things existed, what things don't, and I was developing a character wearing dress pants, and I had to think, how do dress pants work? Do they have like the little snap button that jeans have? And I had to say, I don't feel like that snap button exists.
Yeah, I think snaps and zippers are both relatively recent inventions, as in like para-industrial revolution. Before that, you had a lot of buttons and laces.
Yeah, so I had to look into, well, what did pants look like during the Renaissance? And to do a little bit of research into pants through the ages, so I could figure out what this character's pants looked like. But I think one thing I like about world building especially is it helps me to figure out what's going on. And if I know more about how the entire world is going, then it's much easier for me to figure out new things that I need to come up with. If I have an established world, then I say, oh, I need a character that works like this. I already know their place in the world, so it's much easier for me to build the character to fill that place. And of course, then much of this started out way rougher than now. There's been a lot of discussion and debate over what the world's going to be like and what needs to go into the world. Like, for example, when I started working on Well Gaia, when I very first started working on Well Gaia, it was effectively a joke game where it was me and a group of friends that we affectionately call the Nubs. I was going to make each of our avatars into actual characters and have those characters just run around being idiots in this game. And that's how it all began. Like, as a stupid joke game where Naka was Naka and Goron was Goron. And we just all said stupid things, and I don't even know what I was going to do with the gameplay or anything. And I started thinking a little more seriously about the project over time and what I wanted to do with it and what I wanted the characters to be and how I wanted the world to be like. And one thing that I've been doing since then is I'm trying to make it a point that each of the games that I make as these little side projects, I want to take place in this same world. So we have the game Well Gaia, and then the world of Well Gaia. And this world of Well Gaia is where the game Well Gaia takes place. It's where Tofu Tower takes place. And it's where this new puzzle game that I'm working on takes place. I'll work in why they're playing puzzle games later.
Isn't that how most of these side games go?
Yeah. It's like, there's no reason we should play a puzzle game. Two guys just say, like, we're going to beat each other up, and then a big puzzle board falls from the sky, and you go from there.
I don't know. I think you could have that be a magic thing.
Yeah.
Or it'll be a Sonic boss.
Hey, don't talk shit on Sonic Mania, bro.
Have you played that yet, Naka?
I have, yes. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with Sonic Mania, actually. I did feel like near the end of the game it started to wear on me a bit. But I will still say it is an exceptionally good game.
Yeah, I haven't picked it up yet because, well, I'm usually playing games for the show.
Yeah, that's about the same for me, actually. I spend so much time making Let's Plays and crap that I hardly have time to play games for myself.
Yeah. Like, anyway, speaking of which, I suppose I should ask before we close this out how the Let's Plays are going.
They're going well enough, I suppose. I haven't noticed any major dips lately, though it's been a little while since I've done something big for the channel. And not just like a long Let's Play or something, but I'd like to do a nice big project involving the audience, but I don't know what or when. I guess we'll figure that out when we get there.
Fair enough.
Otherwise, though, I'd say it's been going about the same as always, still churning along. I did a bit of rebranding not long ago, just changing graphics, making graphics consistent, making graphics not horrible. And I have a couple things that I still want to do in the future when I get around to it.
Yeah, reminds me of when we moved the show over to Twitch. We had to update the art assets because the old ones did not look good in high definition. But that's good to hear. I remember the last time you did a audience participation thing. Did did not go well.
And as for the games, though, it's still working on Well Gaia, still making steady progress, if slow. I know I need to actually hammer that one if I have any intention of getting it done this decade. Tofu Tower, on the other hand, is done and completed, and if anybody wants to play it, it is good to go. And then, of course, the competitive puzzle game that I'm working on right now. The goal right now is once I finish with the AI, which hopefully won't take a huge amount longer. Once I finish with the AI, I'm going to work on getting the UI to look nice. Make it actually look like a good game instead of developer graphics right now. Once that's done, I'm going to worry about actually commissioning some music for the game. I want to get an actual professional to make some music for this game. And while they're working on that, I'm going to work on getting it to work online.
Now, are you
Which
gonna
is going to
get?
be an adventure, I'm sure.
Are you gonna try and get Barry to help you with art, or are you gonna do it all yourself, or commission an artist?
Art's going to be all me.
Boy, online debugging.
I
Yeah,
wish you the
online
best of
debugging
luck.
is going to be fun.
Yes.
Yeah, given that, I'll say I don't have any. It's hard for me to place a timeline as to when I'll be done with the game. I want to say I would like to be done by the end of the year, but I feel like I won't finish by the end of the year.
Yeah.
It'll probably end up being like Tofu Tower, where I said I wanted to be done by the end of Tofu Tower by the end of that year, and it took like an additional 3 months.
Fluid release date's another staple of the show.
Yeah, especially your first time online, that's gonna take some time to iron out.
Yeah.
Something delayed game is eventually good.
All right. Well, Naka, it was good having you back on the program, as always.
Pleasure.
Now, you're streaming the development of this game on your channel, correct?
Yes. I'm attempting, and I suppose this is also a reason that I haven't made quite as much progress as I would like to make, is I'm intent on streaming the entire development of this game, beginning to end. And which reminds me, I need to check Twitch and make sure they haven't deleted one of those recordings before I had the chance to upload it to YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I am attempting to stream the entire development of this game, which does limit me a little bit, because if I just get a silly little idea that I can knock out in 10, 15 minutes or look into something, I can't really do that because I have to wait before I can actually stream, and I don't feel like streaming for 15 minutes is worth it.
Duly noted. Is there a particular reason why you're streaming the entire development?
I think some of it was that I just enjoyed streaming some of the development of Tofu Tower when that came around. I enjoyed the whole chat being there and talking with all of them while I hammered out a lot of details and did a lot of refinement for that. And I just thought it was neat having everybody around for that and having people that I could chat with, and even like talking about what's going on in the game and bouncing ideas off people while I'm working on it. Sadly, there's also a lot of like longer, more frustrating bits that I can't really chat with everybody with because because I'm on hour 3 of figuring out why this stupid clown goes out the left side of the play area.
I like, you take the good with the bad, I suppose.
Yeah. But I also then thought that, I mean, just thinking it'd be a neat idea to stream it for that, I also thought it would be neat to have the entire development of a game cataloged. So you could go check whenever you, like at a later date, at any later date, and see, this is how a game is made, beginning to end, this is how it's done.
Handy reference material, I suppose.
And then seeing the evolution of the game along the way. Like, how long did it look like garbage?
I couldn't hazard to answer that question.
And it's been neat because I've got a couple people that show up that have been really excited about it and ask a lot of questions about it. And Been a couple people that really like competitive puzzle games, so they would raise a lot of questions about what was going into this game and what the different characters would be like. And had a couple people asking, like, well, what's this? If it's going to involve the cast of Welgaia and a lot of the characters of Welgaia, then what's the story for this? Why are all these people doing this? And I've been working on the story kind of in my off time because I know I don't need to worry about story for until a later date. So I tend not to think about it too much, but I've been thinking about it a little bit off and on when I'm not streaming. So I'm starting to get ideas about where I want it to go.
It's good to hear. And indeed, we look forward to seeing the progress you make in the months ahead on both.
And so far, I've been hit by a couple setbacks with things taking a little bit longer than I would like to, but I'm still very confident in my ability to finish this game and actually make it something that's neat and fun to play.
All right. Well, if you finish it up, we might have you back on the program to talk more about it.
All right.
All right. So yeah, it feels a little odd to do this in this format, considering Naka, used to be a part of the show, but here we are. Anyway, that Naka Talele, you can get Tofu Tower. Is the game free or does it cost money?
Free. Well, it's pay what you want. So
Fair
it's
enough.
free if you want it to be free. Or if you want to toss me $1, that's cool too.
Yeah, you can get it on itch.io and Game Jolt. Are you aiming for, those services with the puzzle game or...
For the puzzle game, I would like to... For the puzzle game, I feel like I probably will be putting them up there, and I would also like to get it on Steam. Like, I would like this puzzle game to actually be a bigger game, a more professionally put together game than Tofu Tower was.
Well, I suppose you'd need to climb the Steam mountain at some point. It's a constant avalanche over there these days.
Yeah, thankfully, it's a little bit easier to get on now that you don't have to go through Greenlight.
Yeah, I'm like, nobody's missing Greenlight. What do they got, Steam Direct now?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it too much.
But, well, whatever.
Not the specifics of it, anyway.
I'm sure that'll come with time.
Yeah.
Anyway, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion for this broadcast. I know it's been a few weeks, not just with the show delay, but last time, our last proper episode, we had an episode-length interview. So this topic's been percolating for a couple of weeks now. And the question is, console exclusives. Do they still matter in today's world?
Because, yeah, I was one who thought of this one because I was, looking around on IGN and they were, talking about all the exclusives PS4 was getting, and someone mentioned in the comments, do console exclusives really have a place in today's gaming? Is
Well, I suppose we should make a designation here, because there are always going to be console exclusives as long as there are first parties. First parties are, for the most part, there are exceptions like Minecraft, but that's kind of its own unique situation. First party studios are going to make games only for their own platform.
Yeah, literally how we'll freeze over before we get Mario on the Xbox.
Yeah.
And that's Nintendo obviously is the most extreme example of content owners that are also console owners.
Right. And this is especially when in regards to consoles. Like Mario going to iOS is different.
Yeah.
Because, iOS, Android, what have you, are not specific competitors. It's also, this is kind of where the investors wanted those games anyway.
Indeed.
So, we're talking mainly about third-party exclusives.
Yeah, like Uncharted. Hey,
No, Uncharted is a first party.
Oh, it is? I thought it was... Oh, wait, that's right. Never
And then
mind,
there are
I'm dumb.
second-party things just for the purposes of confusing things.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
second party stuff is usually, it's a first party published game, but it, is developed by an outside developer or something like that. Sometimes it's their own IP, but oftentimes it is a first party IP, like the work that Insomniac does with Sony comes to mind.
Yeah.
Stuff like Resistance and Ratchet and Clank. All of those are Sony IP, even though Sony doesn't own Insomniac. They do own Naughty Dog, so Uncharted would be a full first party title. The third party exclusive it would be something like, let's say, Rise of the Tomb Raider. For those who forgot, this was released on the Xbox One first.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people are still complaining about this.
Oh, the timed exclusivity?
Right. And the reason that is the case is because it screwed up the release schedule. This is kind of one of the arguments against high-profile timed exclusives. It was released on the Microsoft family of platforms. I think this one got released on the Xbox 360 as well. And
I don't think Rise was on the 360. I could be wrong.
Point is, it came to Xbox consoles first. Then it came to the PC. The PC's always been its kind of own special zone.
Yeah, kind of like the PC has Nier Automata, but it's mostly billed as a Sony exclusive because the DLC is coming out first there.
Right, or Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5 is a console exclusive for Sony. And here's one of the ways that a console exclusive stays a console exclusive. They put money into it. Like
Yep.
Sony paid Capcom to make Street Fighter 5. That's different than what Microsoft did with Rise of the Tomb Raider. They just paid money for an exclusivity window.
Oh,
and
Rise of the Tomb Raider did come out on the 360, but not PS3.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I'm like, I think it was about a year before Rise of the Tomb Raider hit the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and that really didn't do the game any favors from what I've heard sales wise.
And I think the physical disc even got a short print on PS4.
Wouldn't surprise me. And Tomb Raider is a really significant release because Tomb Raider has been used as a console exclusive at various stages in its life.
Yeah.
Way back in the 90s, after the first game just became mega popular, Sony swooped in and locked that game up for a couple of releases. Tomb Raider 2 and Tomb Raider 3 only came out for the PlayStation.
Yeah, and wasn't that even a pack-in title with the PS1 at one point?
Probably. Maybe, if not here, then in Europe.
Oh, yeah. Good God, Europe loved Tomb Raider.
Yes, they did. America enjoyed it as well. But Tomb Raider 4, The Last Revelation, was the first Tomb Raider game to be released on other consoles, specifically the Dreamcast. In fact, I remember there were ads, advertising that Tomb Raider was coming to the Dreamcast system, even though it had already previously released on the PlayStation, because that was a big deal. The great Sony exclusive is finally breaking exclusivity.
Yeah, the reason why you bought a PlayStation is now going to other consoles.
Right. And, it's an interesting question back in the day whether or not Tomb Raider would have hit the N64 at any point. Whether or not Sony really needed to pay that money, but had to be more secure back in those days.
Yeah, back in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, the consoles weren't exactly the same like they were now. Like
Yeah.
a PS4 and Xbox One are nearly identical.
Yeah, I'm like, really that kind of parallel development came about, I'd say about last generation, but you could probably trace it to about the PlayStation 2 era. But even then, there were some significant differences between the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox.
But yeah, and it's like the current generation is one of the reasons why people are asking why console exclusives even really exist, other than, stuff that's owned by the first party.
Yeah. Well, why console exclusives exist? It's to get a leg up on the competition.
Mhm.
That's always been the answer. That is the eternal answer. It transcends platforms. It transcends the video game industry.
Mhm.
Because, streaming. Like, streaming is starting to fragment
Yeah.
on a colossal scale.
Netflix has most of what people want, so that's why it's so huge right now.
Right. But I'm like, that's changing. Like, for example, Star Trek Discovery. It's the launch title, I guess, for the CBS streaming thing. It's
and then there's that whole Disney thing that's coming up.
Right. Disney's making its own stream. Warner Brothers is introducing DC stream. That's where the new season of Young Justice is going, even though it got really popular on Netflix. I'm like, and you'll notice the pattern here. The enticement is the content, what they got.
Yeah.
And, even Netflix is, this is the reason why they're developing exclusive content. It's because, they need stuff to sell their platform.
Yeah, this is why the Xbox One has been doing very hot compared to even the Switch now and the PS4, because the only exclusive it really has is Halo. That's worth a damn.
I'm like, that's debatable because
you can only get on the Xbox. Forza is now on PC. Gears of War is now on PC.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of more the overall Microsoft initiative, but it's even
I'm not sure Microsoft even really considers PC. I mean, they're trying to make PC gaming work the same as Xbox gaming.
Because
but here's the thing, like even Microsoft's getting into this game because you'll notice that they release their games on Steam every so often, but and here's the important part. They've stopped doing that in favor of their own Windows 10 store.
Yeah.
For example, that Age of Empires remake is getting released on the Windows 10 store and not Steam. This is exceptionally stupid because nobody fucking uses the Windows 10 store. And the Age of Empire 2 games have literally sold millions on Steam. But they want to promote their own platform. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, like, I think the only time I used the Windows 10 store was to get the Netflix app because Chrome was being screwy.
Yeah, the only time we've used the Windows 10 store was with that Gladiator game we reviewed.
Yeah.
That
was a pain, honestly.
Well, that was also because it hadn't been released on Steam yet, and the developer asked us to review it. So, I said, sure, why not? Yeah, the game was it was average for a PlayStation 2 game. It's got some PlayStation 2 problems, but you can watch our review on that to get the full scoop. Now it's also, regionality has played a part in console exclusives. This can basically be summed up as Japanese developers don't really give a shit about the Xbox series.
The Xbox failed hard in Japan.
Yeah. See the story that culminated in and then ended with Blue Dragon.
The early Xbox 360 era is about the only time that Microsoft really made a push in that direction. Remember, this is about the this is about the tail end of the Japanese gaming golden age
Mhm.
before things got upended. So Microsoft still thought that they had to make massive inroads in Japan to be successful within the console industry. So, and what that amounted to was funding a whole bunch of JRPGs. Both first party stuff like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, and third party stuff like Tales of Vesperia and Star Ocean 4. Um, don't remember which one that was offhand. You know, the point is they got, they stacked their console with a whole bunch of JRPGs, and it did some good, but not enough that made the initiative worth it. Which is why they abandoned it about 2008, 2009.
Yeah, I think they also paid for Tales of Vesperia to come to the West.
Yes, I'm like,
That's why we don't get the PS3 version, kids.
Yes, Eternal Sonata. I think there was a few more in that mix.
Yeah, like I think they're still doing stuff with Bandai Namco, but that's really it. I mean, Square kind of just releases Final Fantasy.
Yeah, well, that was like the last ditch effort, getting Final Fantasy on the Xbox 360. It was a huge deal, and Final Fantasy defecting consoles once upon a time was a huge deal. Like Final Fantasy VII is considered to be like one of the biggest moves that made Sony. Final Fantasy 13 didn't do a lot of business for Microsoft. But that might have been not just because Final Fantasy 13 is a hard piece of shit, but it was really terrible on the Xbox 360 because Blu-ray, like the Final Fantasy 13 was built with the Blu-ray format in mind. So it came out on like 3 discs and was ugly as sin.
Yeah, some things don't age well.
Well, it's not even aged well. Like it looked ugly at the time.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a bad port, is what I'm getting at here. But the point of order is, breaking exclusives is also a time-honored tradition. But I suppose we should get back into the modern era because exclusivity is played on a different scale now. It's less trying to secure the game itself and more to secure marketing. Like Sony has the exclusive marketing on things like Destiny and Call of Duty, and the previous generation, Microsoft was all in on Call of Duty. And that came down to 3 initials: DLC.
Yeah, that I was gonna say that's kind of the worst kind of exclusivity is now is, well, yeah, you can get the game on anything, but if you want to get like the most different equipment options in the game, you have to get it on such and such a platform, or you have to order it from 3 different retailers on such and such a platform.
Right, and this has been going on for since last generation. For example, the Batman Arkham series, the Joker Challenge Rooms, PlayStation 3 exclusive, never released outside that platform. Batman Arkham City, the Armored Edition. Granted, this came about later because Wii U, but that had some exclusive features not seen in other consoles. The point is, it's less about securing the whole and more about securing the bits. DLC, skins, quote unquote, like 30, 40 minutes of exclusive content, like exclusive levels, what have you. The console makers are aiming to have the most complete version of a game.
I'm still a little bit grumpy about Battletoads only being on a platform I don't have Shovel Knight on.
That's more, well, that's a first party thing. Like, Battletoads is owned by Microsoft.
It is? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're rare, remember?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yep.
Yeah, and like that's why Kratos, and yeah, there is also like first party DLC. Nintendo does this a lot.
See Bayonetta 2.
Well, Bayonetta 2 is
Bayonetta 2 is the entire game is them.
yeah, I'm talking more about Rocket League.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just announced that Mario and Luigi and Samus cars are coming to that platform.
Yeah, the
And I believe-
Samus car and then the Mario Brothers car that is one or the other depending on which team it's on.
Yeah, and I believe there's like a PlayStation 4 exclusive car in that game. And that's like a Sony. Like, the point is, like, you're not gonna see that IP, on on the Sony version of that game or the PC or whatever. Once again, there are exceptions like Microsoft. The the Halo mashup pack for Minecraft was announced. That is going to appear in all better together versions of the game.
How does that work?
Microsoft allows it.
No, but how does that work? Okay, I guess what I'm saying is there is sort of a thematic disconnect between Halo and Minecraft, but sure.
How does it work with Skyrim? Or no, seriously, there are Skyrim packs in the Minecraft console versions of it.
I know Minecraft mostly strikes me as less sciencey, but although I guess I can see you walking around with the pixely beam sword thing. So
yeah, I'm like, I don't know how it works thematically. It's more Microsoft willed Halo into Minecraft and allowed it into the Switch version.
Yeah, I know it like it's not hard to program or anything. It just strikes me as a weird match.
Take that up with Mojang or whatever. Like, it's not my place to figure out why this is happening in universe. It's happening because money. And Minecraft has kind of there are now tiers of Minecraft. There's the new Better Together version. There's the Origin version, which is PlayStation Land, and there's also like the mobile version, which is where the 3DS version came from.
And there's also the OG PC version.
Right. Which I'll note has still never come to Steam.
Yeah.
But and in terms of exclusives, like Microsoft's biggest exclusive in years may have been secured in PlayerUnknown Battleground. Now, the people are trying to figure out if it's coming to the PlayStation 4, and it's probably going to do that at some point. But PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is the absolute hottest game going on right now. Like, and I'm being dead serious. It sold like 10 million copies already, and it's like the most played game on Steam ever. And Microsoft is hoping that success is going to transplant to the Xbox One. We'll see what happens in that regard. So, as far as the question goes, do console exclusives matter? Well, I suppose that's the actuality of that is immaterial. They matter because the console makers think they matter. So they will continue to be a thing that matters. It's like, but they are definitely less important than they were just a few generations ago.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, there's no reason you couldn't run Halo 5 on a PS4 other than Microsoft won't allow it.
Right, or crossplay. Like this is the big thing that's going on right now. Like crossplay is a thing. Unless you're on a Sony platform. Like seriously, Nintendo has said, you want to play Minecraft or Rocket League with people with Xbox systems? Sure, why not?
Just play nice.
Yeah, Sony has not, and with Minecraft, it's over Xbox Live because the Better Together edition requires like an Xbox Live login or something like that. Like,
does it require gold status or just an account?
I don't know. I forget what the exact interface method between Xbox Live and Minecraft is, but I do remember that was like something that was needed, and that was like the big reason why Sony wouldn't allow it, because it would clash with their own PSN network.
Yeah.
As far as Rocket League, reasons.
Yeah. Like, I could see something owned by a first party, them not wanting to have on there, but really Rocket League.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, is there anything else that needs to be said about this topic?
Not really.
All right. So that will bring us to the end of another Fragments of Silicon episode. Except there's actually quite a bit of news I've got to get through here. Let's see. First up, instead of the regular episode of MSP, we had that on Monday.
Yes, I need to get a link for that.
Yes. We have a game review coming up after the show because we have quite a few games to get through this week, and there was a spot available. And the game we are reviewing is called Fajon. At least I think that's how it's pronounced.
I would have said Fyong.
It could be Fyong. It could be Fyong because I think this is Norwegian.
Yeah, it looks kind of like Fjord, so.
Yeah, Fyong. Which is how do I put this? A Bust-A-Move inspired puzzle game. Although not in the way you think. It's less popping bubbles and you move by flinging people around.
It reminded me a lot of like Angry Birds.
Yeah, I'm like
only instead of being a projectile, you're trying to reach a goal.
Right. Well, yeah, more on that in the actual review. So next week is very fluid in terms of our programming. Or at least the main shows next Wednesday. Because, so addressing MSP next week, we may not be doing MSP per se. And that is to say, we may be debuting the pilot for our new project called The Last News Desk on the Left. This is a thing that we've been planning on for, 9 months now?
Something like that.
Ever since, like, the end of the election. And, just last year, politics was absolutely dominating our MSP discussions.
Yeah. For those of you who've been following MSP, that's why we've not been talking about it as much.
Yeah, so we decided to spin that off into its own project. And it's been a bit difficult to launch due to, the pilot episode has actually been canceled twice.
Yeah.
First, because Mac had been building that motion comic of his that debuted recently. But we were actually supposed to do, the second recording was going to happen the Friday I got the evac notice.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had to cancel it because I had to flee.
Yes.
So next week we may be doing that. It depends on if we get a guest for next week or not.
Yeah. I said
it might also be a sort of preview thing for
if I can't get
introducing Kevin or something.
Yeah, if I can't get a guest, then we'll probably just introduce Kevin and then possibly do the Last News Desk on Friday.
Yeah, and so with this new project is coming a new addition to our group here.
Yeah, the Moonhawk family of programs, Moonhawk Studios family.
The Moonhawk Radio Network.
Yeah.
That's kind of the overall name I just gave it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll be bringing in a good friend of mine, Kevin Grusling. He does a lot of political stuff on Twitter. I've known him for a few years now. It's
Mhm.
why when I thought because Mac has been talking about you mixing with the lineup, like right now, Last News Desk isn't going to have the same lineup as our other shows. Like, it's probably going to be like a 4-man team,
Mhm.
but we're not exactly sure the exact configuration because politics being what they are, you know,
And it's also
and
entirely possible us from MSP and Fragments could be rotated around. Stuff
yeah,
hasn't been settled yet.
yeah, it's like there's a lot of fluidity with the scheduling and all that stuff, which is one of the reasons why it's taken so long to get this project off the ground. And we're still tweaking that. Indeed, that's why we're doing a pilot episode to see how this project will flow.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, that may be next week's MSP. It may not. I'm like, we may do the pilot on another Friday, but consider this like the formal unveiling of said project. Now, also, the alpha episode of Fragments of Silicon is a bit in flux, so it's a bit of a story. We're supposed to have Bandai Namco on the program next week, but our usual contact, Dimitri, who was on this program actually this season, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's going to be out of town. He's going to be in New York for a few weeks. And it's also, the game we're going to be talking about is Project Cars 2 because that is releasing next week, I believe. So
Something like
it
that.
makes sense to talk about that game first and foremost. We'll probably talk about other projects because that's kind of what we do with Bandai Namco.
Mm-hmm. They've released so much stuff.
Yeah. But here's the thing, like Bandai Namco has several community reps,
Mhm.
and they represent different games. Project Cars 2 is not under his domain, so we have been referred to. Make sure I got the name here. Cyrus Wesson, who has been mentioned on in previous interviews with Dimitri. Like, he's the guy who's in charge of Project Cars 2. He's the guy in charge of the Dot Hack series. In terms of community relations.
Yay.
So we should be having him. I'm like, I talked about it to Dimitri the other day, and he said he would let Cyrus know, and I've sent. I sent my email. I sent some Twitter DMs. He's following me on Twitter now. He accepted my Skype invitation. The thing is, I haven't been able to confirm it
Yes.
because, well, all this happened in like just before the show started. So, I had to do this instead of that. So tomorrow, I'm hoping to confirm with him, but it's not 100%. This could still fall through for whatever reason. Like maybe he gets concerned about our analytics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've had this happen before.
Yes. So we'll still have Dimitri on the program.
Yeah, Dimitri likes us for some reason.
Well, we're stress relief for him, apparently. So, but yeah, he's got some games he's repping for 2018 that looking forward to.
Mhm.
If the stars line, we should be talking about him with. He mentioned his upcoming games are Ni no Kuni 2, Dragon Ball Fighters, and Code Vein. 3 really big 2018 Bandai Namco games.
Yeah, spoiler, those are all on my I want to get list.
Yeah. I'm like, we'll probably have him on the program in January, looking at the release dates. Because that has an actual release date. As far as Cyrus goes, we'll see what happens. Like, if it doesn't happen, it's probably going to be a double topic week because, it's heading into Thursday. And getting people on short notice is difficult.
Indeed.
So, we'll have an update on that probably during the Sunday reviews. That being said, we also have a Tuesday interview, and this is happening. We will be finally having on the program Gregor Ebert of Head Up Games. And if that developer sounds familiar to you, it's because we review a lot of their games.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who gave us Looter Kings recently, and Toby the Secret Mind, sort of. Like, that actually came from, they forwarded that to the developer. And they just gave us a new game to review a couple weeks. Truly On. And this is going to be Gregor's first English interview, so he's kind of nervous about it. But I'm looking forward to this because Head Up Games has been one of our preeminent partners, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not an investment, but they're probably the developer / publisher we've reviewed the most games for. I would have to scour all of the reviews we did to see how many of their games we've actually done, but I don't feel like doing that.
Yeah, it's a large number.
Yeah, that is the important thing, and they are a steady source of reviews. Review material, and unlike some other steady sources, they are, he's actually part of that publisher, as opposed to like a marketer. I do work with some marketers, but I don't have any desire to have them on the program because they're just facilitators.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as our reviews, this week, outside of the game we are reviewing, Fajong, we also got reviews of Color Code, Shadows of Kurgansk, and trying to remember the last one here, Stardrift Nomads. We're also going to be doing a multiplayer session on Stardrift Nomads because it supports up to 8 players, and I really think multiplayer is kind of the missing ingredient here. Because I put about an hour of work into it, and it's a fairly bland game. But more on that in the days ahead. So, with all that in mind, we'll be back in a bit to do the review of Fajong, and until then, I wish you good gaming.